What a nice introduction, and Suzanne is really special to me, so I hope she's very special to you. A good person. Today I'm going to talk about a number of things. I'm going to hopefully get through them relatively quickly so that I don't take up too much time. But can everybody hear me? Okay, great. And you can interrupt me with questions, or we can keep them till the end. So I'll leave that up to Suzanne or whoever. You should be in charge. This is your home, so let's let it be you. Okay, let's talk just a few minutes on end of life and family dynamics, because it's not, when we think about it and the decisions we're making, we're thinking usually just about us or our spouse. We're not our children, we hope not. So, but I want us to understand that there is so much involved with the family when we talk about this topic that we should never discuss it without going there. So we're starting with this thought that you're writing family history through your behavior. Consider giving the patient, whoever that is, a wonderful experience of loving, united family support, because that's what we want to pass on through the generations. We don't want to pass on all the anger, all the things that happen, because we know that all of these family dynamics repeat themselves. They go on and on. So you say or think you're ready, and I hear people say that to me all the time. I'm ready to die. I'm ready to die. But you know, the truth is, when they hear it, they're not. And I could give you 5 examples of today that one of the 5 really is that that I'm working with, not paid, but that I volunteer my time to be with. And I would say really only one of those 5 is actually really ready. So we have to remember no 2 families are the same. We're all very, very unique. And if I have a few seconds left over, I'll tell you some hysterical stories of my nuclear family when we think about how families are so different, even within the families, we are all unique. So I want to go over real quick some of the decisions that we have to make. Chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, ventilators, tracheostomies, feeding tubes, antibiotics, dialysis, care at home or a facility, palliative care, hospice, all these things that we need to think about. And most of us do, actually, but did we get it down in paper? And most of all, did we tell our family? Funeral plans are very interesting, because what we might think today, and I'm teaching this from the view also for people who develop dementia, that they might be a practicing Methodist today, but their entire childhood and upbringing was that of a Catholic, and they may revert back to when they were a child for things, or when they think about services. It may not seem to fit as well, so we want to look at that. And all the plans that go on with this, that who writes the obituary. In my family, that became quite an issue. Flowers, cremation, where will the remains of, if you're cremated, be maintained? When are we going to have services? Are we going to accommodate everybody to come in? Does it have to be right away? Does it have to be later? And these are the kind of things that we want to start discussion. We're afraid to talk about death. We don't want to get this much into it because it's almost like an omen, but it's not. These are the things that keep families together and keep us comfortable that we're going to be comfortable. So the person who is dying, I want you to know, has autonomy. They get to make all the decisions until they're deemed incapable of making those decisions. And the daughter or the son doesn't get to make the decision that they're incompetent. Because with my sister, my mother was competent, and my mother was walking around downtown in a nightgown, and she was competent. But to me, I did not see that and I thought we needed real diagnostics done on my mom. And the spouse, the children or the spouse, who's going to make those questions? And sometimes people don't want to make the decisions. They don't want to be in that position. And then who is the individual that's been given the medical power of attorney? And you know, you can change that medical power of attorney many times as you want and make any changes you want to it and who holds it up until the time that you're no longer mentally competent. And then, so aging spouses are called to care and make most of the decisions. And I say a lot of this depends on what was the state of the marriage at the time, the cognitive ability to make the decisions. We might look at the person saying they're not cognitively intact, but their spouse may not be either. And what are the parents' expectations of the children? How much involvement do they want? How often have you talked with your children about what you want and what you need? So we'll get into that a little bit when we talk about doulas. Why siblings disagree? Oh my God, I could make a list much longer than this. But every child has different parents. I don't care what you say. There were 4 of us in the family. My oldest brother, he was a general in the Army. The younger of my brothers, I was the baby, but the younger of my brother was a practicing Buddhist. And the oldest brother, a very devout Catholic. And my sister, who I call Martha Stewart, because everything in her life was perfection and very neat and tidy, and it had to be beautiful, beautiful. So why siblings disagree? Because they have anxiety about their own roles. I was still the kid sister who knew nothing. My specialty for 20 years was dementia, but I knew nothing, and I shouldn't give my opinion. We also, even though we are the children, we have fear of our own mortality, and we're making decisions about ourselves when really we should be making them for our family, our parents. And then all of us, no matter what, is that we all need encouragement, support, advice, and above all, we need approval. We don't need to have people questioning our decision making. We all want approval. We all do. How do we get to that? So I love this blog that I read one time that said, it's like being put down with your siblings in the center of a nuclear reactor and being told to figure it out. That's really the truth. I mean, if you haven't prepared for this, or you don't have a background in this, or a family member who does, I mean, who knows what to do? I have a very educated family that really, amongst ourselves, discuss things. And even at the last minute, they wanted to change their decisions, even though that wasn't my parents' wish. So we talk about birth order, sibling rivalry, assigned roles. We have the responsible one, the peacemaker, the black sheep, and dad's or mom's favorite, right? So I would just say the responsible one in my family was Martha. She was always on top of everything. The peacemaker, you would have thought it was the Buddhist. No way. I ended up having to be the peacemaker. The Buddhist turned out to be the black sheep. And dad's favorite or mom's favorite varied by who was in the room with them alone. I also want to talk about guilt. Guilt rides a lot of decisions that we make and how we react to death. And how we deal with one another is feeling guilty. My sister felt like she could never do enough. I had one brother who felt things should just happen naturally and we shouldn't intervene that much. So this is one that most of us have to go to therapy for, guilt. If you were raised as like I was as a Catholic child with the priests and the nuns, I lived with guilt. I spent my life on my knees in the confessional. I don't do that anymore, by the way. And then you have the fly-in family members. There's the one that's been there the whole time, taking care of mom and dad, and somebody flies in. Here comes Southwest Airlines. And they know everything. They haven't been around mom for a year, but they know more than anybody, and they have a lot of disapproval for the person who's been providing all the care. And I'm very protective of the fly-in family member. I mean, the family member that's there and who's flying in. Money and financial issues are the biggest thing that I hate. I find this the most repulsive, but it's a realistic thing that we have to deal with. But I would just say to you, it's often not discussed, but it ends up being at the core of the problem. If we have to do 24-hour nursing care to keep mom or dad at home versus putting them into a facility, and are we looking at how much it costs, or are we looking what's best for mom or dad? Decision making that we make that's based on money is usually not good. Keeping the house, all of this could be taken care of if we just could talk about death with one another. And my goal in life now is not to be sitting at the bedside and you're going to get to talk to somebody that provides that beautiful and wonderful time. Mine is to get the world and our community comfortable talking about death. And I can tell you some ways that I do that. Sometimes the sibling who provides care sometimes controls too much. And those of us that can't be there all the time want to have a say also. So it's learning to listen and be open. But some of this isn't going to happen if we don't take care of it ahead of time. When parents add to the confusion, this is you, okay? This is me. This is when I am taking responsibility for adding to this problem. First of all, am I competent? And is my spouse competent? And mom tells me one thing and she tells my sister another. This is so common you can't imagine. You are creating the confusion. I'm creating the confusion when I tell my sister I want one thing because that's what she wants to hear. And my daughter wants to hear something else. And so I'll tell her whatever she wants to hear because I don't want to engage in all this confusion and upset when we're together. Dad will tell me something and doesn't want my brother to know. Yeah, make everybody secret keepers in your family as parents. That's the worst thing that you can do. There should be, you're as sick as your secrets is what they say. And it makes a family sick when there are secrets. So to put one of your kids or a family member in that position of being the secret keeper is not fair. Oh, and we can be manipulative. I never thought I would be manipulative. Never. You know what? I can be manipulative. And I've learned the older I get, I'm getting a little bit more manipulative. And I would say you don't want me in your facility. After all my years, you don't want to admit me. But parents can be manipulative just by this one statement. I know I will just die if I'm put into a nursing home or an assisted living. I will die. I want you to know there is that possibility, but all my years of experience, Suzanne, where are you?
Right here.
Suzanne, in all your years of experience, have you known anybody that came in and just died that night because they were put in assisted living? Yeah, or a nursing home? You know somebody? Okay, we got one. Do I have two? We got two. Okay, three. All right. 3 out of this big group died because they were put into an assisted living. I'll tell you, those odds are, pretty good that it isn't going to kill you. I understand it, and I know that it's very serious, and it's something we need to take into consideration. Do you? Sure.
That's why I call our healthcare God's living room, not God's waiting room.
That's beautiful. I love that. You'll have to write that down for me, Suzanne. Could you give the rest of the talk, please? Okay. So, the view. If you live down the street or across the world, it doesn't matter. I even got to travel to China and visit with people there and give talks in China. And it was amazing to me that we all share. These are humanistic feelings that we have. We're different. We have different cultures, but essentially we are the same. We all know the problems. We want answers. We can talk about the problems all day long, but we want answers how to fix all this. So the only answers can come from communication. And I went to UT, to their law school, and took their mediation classes that the lawyers take to learn to mediate with families. And it's been one of the most exceptional things I've done, but one of the hardest things, much harder than nursing. So we have to identify who's on the team. That's number one. The patient, a loved one, spouse, children, grandchildren, brothers, sisters, in-laws, outlaws, clergy, hospice teams. Think of all the people that are on hospice, and a palliative care team. So there's not one person. When we talk about going and finding who we need to be talking with, all these people are involved. Sharing information with the entire family. I have to tell you, when my dad died, and that was many years ago, that was much harder. But today with cell phones, FaceTime, iPads, there's hardly a reason why we can't communicate with the family together, to have a case manager, social worker, hospice case manager, or nurse. Each family member should be given opportunity to say what they want with freedom and acceptance, not that we're going to do what you say, but at least we're willing to listen. Agree not to talk behind each other's backs. Good luck. And then the other thing that I want to say to you is that when we meet with the family and we meet all together, it alleviates a lot of problems. A lot, because my sister would say to me, well, that's not what I heard the doctor say. No, that isn't what I heard the doctor say. The doctor said, and then when I call the doctor says something different. Poor doctor, you know. So my thought is all of these things should be, and now with the phones that we have, the systems in doctors' offices, hospitals, even here where you live, they have the ability to get you all together on a line at one time. Okay? Take advantage of them, make them busy, earn their money. Who can help us? Lawyers, clergy, social workers, mediators, and family therapists. What type of help do you need? You need a lot of factual knowledge. You don't need to hear what your neighbor did. You don't need to hear what it meant when your neighbor went through the hip and moved to rehab. You need factual information. Experience of others who are reliable, I would tell you, you better be sure they are reliable. When you see things differently, what can you do? Outside of an acute crisis, when something has to be done immediately, give it time. Things don't have to be decided in a day usually. Yes, there are crisis moments where that's true, but many times just getting the information of what we have to decide out there, question yourself, why do you feel so strongly about this? I mean, when you start feeling so strong about something, usually that's your issue. So question yourself, be open to the perception of others. And this is a class I love teaching, but get a professional assessment and get it in writing. And then do the results on a conference call. Advanced directives. I'm not giving a class on advanced directives today, but I want to tell you that if we had lots of time or afterwards, if you wanted to talk with me for a moment, there is something called the 5 wishes. Who's heard of the 5 wishes? Whoa, I am impressed. Okay, now tell me, you don't have to raise your hand, but it would be helpful to me if you would. How many people have actually enacted and put into effect the 5 wishes? Okay, big difference. The advanced directives, understanding the directives of an advanced directive that you get online or that you get from your lawyer versus the 5 wishes. They're both legal instruments, but I would love you to look at the 5 wishes because it talks about how do you want to handle pain. And I'm going to just not go into everything on it, but I want to talk about pain. Nobody says, oh God, I want to be in lots and lots of pain. Just give me as much as you possibly can. No, they don't do that. But it's very interesting that some people do not want to be medicated to the point that they're not coherent to talk with their family when they come in. And they're willing to take a certain amount of pain to be coherent. There are other people, me, knock me out. I've said everything I have to say to all of you. I love you. I love each and every one of you, but just knock me out. Then there are cultural differences in regards to pain management. And in some cultures, it is that the pain is an atonement for your sins. And if that happens to be, we have to be culturally competent and understand different cultures and why you are asking for what you're asking. And you need to discuss it ahead of time because we want to get ahead of the pain, not wait until the pain is so bad that we can't catch up. So these are important discussions, advanced directives. And what I want, and I hope you want, is a more united family and the feeling that we made the transition for our loved one as kind, compassionate, and easy as possible. The good death. Is there a good death? I believe there is a good death. Can every death be a good death? No. But what can we do to make that happen? So remember that you are writing family history through your behavior. Consider giving the patient a wonderful experience of loving, united family support. Now, I'm going to take just a minute, and I'm not going to do my PowerPoint because I want to leave you time to talk about what you do as well. But I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about the role of a doula. Has anybody heard of a death doula? Raise your hand if you've heard of a death doula. Do you know that I've been in this field for ages and I really didn't know anything about death doulas? But I want to tell you what this position is. It is somebody who has been trained, and I received my training through the International Education of End-of-Life individuals or staff. But you don't have to be a nurse. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a social worker. Anybody can be a doula when they've been through the training. And why is that? Because we're not being trained to handle the medical side of this. We're not being trained to handle the legal side of this. What we're learning is how to be compassionate and be with someone or the family or both as they go through the dying process. To me, after doing the doula course, I felt like I had my doula. And it's what you want your legacy to be. Do you want your family telling your legacy, or do you know what you want your legacy to be? Maybe some of you don't really care that you're leaving a long-term legacy. My mother, when I asked her about it, said, I want all of the children and all of the grandchildren to read. I want them to be readers and to enjoy reading and to pass on, whether it's picture books or whatever it is, but a love of learning and reading. They don't have to go to college. And my God, they had no money. We lived in a 600 square foot home, all 6 of us, and we were all very well educated. So I have to say to you, what is your legacy? What's most important to you? And maybe you haven't even thought about it. I'm still thinking about it, what I want my legacy to be. But at least I'm thinking about it now. When you're dying, it's not the time for your family to be figuring out, and I know you will get into this, but that's not the time to be figuring out your favorite music. If I was born a Catholic and I knew the Catholic song, and you're singing some hymn from the Methodist or Lutheran or any religion, I never even heard that song, and I can't relate to it. So what we want to do, and what was the popular music that somebody wanted to listen to? So I recently traveled to Connecticut to work with the families on what was people's favorite music, and I got the families to write it down with me, and we spent a morning kind of reminiscing. It was wonderful about their family and music. One said, well, we never listened to music, but they did. And as it all came up, but then we started playing the music, and the people all had dementia. That was one of the requirements for admission. But you should see what people reacted to. The music that we played that got people to move in their seat, that got people to look up, people to mouth the words along with it. Very interesting. So if you're going to play music while someone is dying, now when my mother was dying, my brother wanted to play Anya. Do you all know Anya? Yes. Okay, that's real good for about 4 minutes. But Anya, after 8 hours, it was lucky I didn't kill my brother because I didn't know his plans, what he wanted. But Anya wasn't it after that amount of time. I said that was going to kill Mother. I knew Mom some of her songs. It's like and anybody who's worked with people with dementia know that when you start saying the Our Father, people will begin to say that prayer most often. They'll say it along with you. It's that long-term memory. And whether we have dementia or we don't, we're going back. We're going back to remember. We're going back in time and to our families and our parents. And it's a time of reflection. A doula is somebody who's going to take the time and be with you. Doulas do not replace hospice by any stretch of the imagination. But doulas can offer something that is really beautiful. And I would be happy to come in someday and just talk about all the things you could expect from a doula, how to find a doula, what to do with a doula when you get her. I think that it's very important. Now, I want you to know that I personally, now I live alone, so I'm very happy to die in my own bed. But if I had been a young mother and I was dying, I would not want to die in the home with my children. I wouldn't want them remembering me in that home. I want that home to feel different. So I would want inpatient hospice. So no matter what your age is, and I never thought, I mean, in my life, that I would bury a child. I never thought that, but I had to do that. And I would say that I was not prepared for what do we do now for my younger daughter, for my husband. So it's never, I mean, I don't think people should talk about death all day, all night. That shouldn't be it. But it shouldn't be a morose conversation. So I usually say, and this will be my tip that I kind of leave you with, but I would say that one of the greatest things is how to bring up the topic. You just can't say, let's talk about dying. Let's talk about death today. I usually bring it up as I read something fascinating in an obituary. Absolutely fascinating. Or if I'm with friends, I'll say, you will not believe, my daughter is a pediatric intensive care physician, Brown graduate, Northwestern practicing, and she came home when her dad died, and it was the two of us. And she wrote the obituary. She wanted to write it. It was fine by me. She wrote the obituary and said he died of a cold. When I read that in the paper, I mean, it's not funny, but it is funny. He didn't die of a cold. Who dies of a cold? And what doctor would write in the obituary, he died of a cold? I don't know what she was thinking, but that's what got printed. And is anything the worse for it? No, it really isn't. You know, is it anybody's business? But what would you like said about you? Do you want to write your own, or do you not want one at all? So I start with just talking and sometimes telling the story of the obituary story of, oh my God. And then my oldest brother, the general, was a speechwriter for many dignitaries and even a president up in Washington, D.C. Harvard graduate, brilliant man. He wrote an obituary that if we'd had to pay for it, we would have had to have sold the house. Have you all looked at the cost of obituaries, you know, by the lines of them? I would tell you, we all would have had to chip in and taken a mortgage on our house to put in. So these are some things to think about. I want talking about death to be comfortable. I can't take away your fears. I can't change all things, but I'll tell you what, I think I can make you reflect differently. I think there's an opportunity to do that. So if you've never heard of the Death Cafe, it's a time where you have dessert and coffee and tea, and people go in and have a discussion. And you can start with talking about what are you, when you think about death, what gets you going? What is it that you come very preoccupied with or very repetitive in your thinking? Because that's where we want to get you past so you can move on.
Jenkins, most of you know me, internal medicine, lung disease, intensive care, but not a part of last night was for, I think, 6 to 8 years. I was the chair of ethics committees for 5 Baptist hospitals. That has an implication at end of life. It also is a legal thing in Texas. Not often used because hospitals don't want to be on Channel 5 as the family brings up an argument of what they're doing with their loved ones. So that it's not often used, but it was there. I have some personal experience. This past Tuesday, I went to I'll use the word, a Vitas inpatient hospice to thank them again on the anniversary of my wife's death at inpatient hospice. As it so happens, I got there before sunrise that day and passed by the nurses' station and she's doing okay. And as I walked in the room, I realized something had changed. I'm not sure why, I brought my stethoscope in my toolkit. So in fact, it was my ears and stethoscope, and followed by asking the nurse to confirm the silence that I had heard. But it was okay. I was comforted that I was the one that was there for my wife. So I've been through it. The reason I'm here is to offer a challenge. The challenge is to look something up on the internet. We've mentioned music today. Many of you know Sting, musician, singer, And he was part of putting together a show that was going to go on stage, I think in London and New York, called The Last Ship, the story of a English shipyard that was closing down. And there were multiple storylines of father and son estranged, a love story that didn't work out. And the music and lyrics are all wonderful. But one of the storylines was of Father O'Brien, a priest who had come to minister to the shipyard workers who were going through a terrible time in their lives. Father O'Brien then discovers that he has terminal cancer. And Sting was asked to turn this into music. But he did. The song is So to Speak. And you can look at the lyrics, you can listen to it online, I checked it out, and you can, but it's So to Speak. The lyrics mention radium, chemo, and barium meals as he assesses what hospitals and doctors can do or may want to do. But the refrain at multiple occasions during the song is that ship has already sailed, so to speak, as he assesses and accepts what he faces. And in fact, one of the lines is, love is the answer. And you mentioned the love of the family and the love that people experience. So if you look that up, so to speak, it offers a perspective that, to me, expanded what we're talking about. And I commend it to you.